Late last night, a document landed in my hands that should never have been shared. 3 words stood out: critical infrastructure collapse. What it described wasn't a future threat. It was already happening. As I'm speaking to you right now, at this very moment on Monday morning, January 26, 2026, something unprecedented is unfolding across America. Gas pumps in the heartland are going empty. Power plants that run on nuclear energy are getting alarming messages about their fuel. Farmers who grow our food can't get what they need to plant their crops. And inside the highest levels of government, officials are scrambling to explain how a statement made just days ago, "Canada isn't necessary to us," turned out to be not just incorrect, but dangerously, irreversibly wrong. If you want to understand what's coming in the next 3 days, hit that subscribe button now. Turn on your alerts, because what I'm going to reveal isn't just another news story. This is about whether our country can survive when someone decides basic facts don't matter anymore. Let me take you back to where this all started. Just 3 days ago. Friday, January 23rd, mid-afternoon. Inside the highest office in the land, a meeting was taking place. Sources who were present, speaking privately to the press, say a specific phrase was spoken aloud. The claim? That America doesn't depend on its northern neighbor more than they depend on us. Reports suggest an advisor, someone who used to work in the energy business, attempted to raise concerns about how our refineries actually operate. He was reportedly interrupted. The words used, according to sources: "We've got plenty of our own oil. We produce enough. We don't need anyone else." Within hours, a presidential directive was prepared, a massive 25% tax on everything coming from Canada: energy, wood, metal, uranium, fertilizer. No exceptions, no gradual rollout, effective immediately. By Saturday morning, the order was official. Behind the scenes, the communications team allegedly told friendly media outlets that Canada's government would surrender by Monday. The belief, and this is crucial to understanding everything that followed, the belief was that Canada's economy completely relies on selling to America, that they export to us because they have no other choice, that their entire system is built around serving American consumers. That assumption was based on old information, decades old. The world isn't like that anymore. Sunday night, shortly after 11 p.m., a phone call took place. President to Prime Minister. It lasted just 4 minutes. There was no back and forth. According to transcripts that multiple news organizations have obtained, Canada's leader said something to this effect: "Mr. President, you've made your decision. We've made ours." The line went dead. Less than an hour later, Canada's top government officials held an emergency meeting. Just before 1 a.m. Monday morning, they activated something called the National Strategic Reserve Act. This wasn't a matching tax. This wasn't a fee. This was a complete shutdown, a total ban on shipping critical resources to the United States until what they're calling a full security assessment is complete. They're not trying to negotiate better terms. They're cutting the flow entirely. Monday morning, just after 3 a.m., something physical happened. Valves on a major pipeline called Enbridge Line 5 started closing. Not symbolically, actually closing. Pipeline workers in Ontario received direct commands from Canada's energy officials: stop the flow heading south. By 6 in the morning, the volume had dropped to less than a third. By 9 a.m., it hit zero. 4 million barrels every single day of a specific type of oil gone. Refineries in America's middle states are now running on whatever they had stored up. That storage, depending on where you are, lasts somewhere between 2 and 4 days. We're now 7 hours into this. Monday morning, 7:30 a.m., fertilizer shipments by rail from Canada's prairie provinces stopped at the border. The trains are just sitting there. The provincial leader, working with the national government, cited unstable supply conditions and halted all trains heading south carrying the chemicals farmers need. We're 3 weeks away from the season when seeds must go in the ground. Corn growers in the Midwest are looking at empty warehouses. They need that fertilizer immediately. If it doesn't get spread on the fields by mid-April, there won't be a harvest in the fall. Monday morning, 8:15 a.m., Cameco, the Canadian company that produces uranium, suspended export permissions to the United States. This part isn't getting nearly enough attention, so pay close attention here. America gets 1/5 of its electricity from nuclear plants. We produce almost no uranium ourselves. 95% comes from other countries. We used to import from Russia and Kazakhstan. Congress banned Russian uranium 2 years ago as punishment. That left us with one dependable, massive, secure source: Canada. The uranium mines in northern Saskatchewan are some of the richest on the planet. Those mines keep America's nuclear plants running. 8 reactors are scheduled for maintenance and refueling this spring. If they don't receive fresh fuel, they shut down. If we lose 20% of our power grid just as summer heat arrives, we're facing widespread power outages across the East Coast. Monday morning, 9:42 a.m., trading on the Chicago Commodities Exchange was suspended specifically for wheat contracts. The panic over fertilizer has become so intense that traders can't even figure out what prices should be. Gas prices in Michigan jumped more than 80 cents in a single night. Stations in Detroit are restricting customers to just 10 gallons each. By tomorrow, some won't have anything left to restrict. If you filled your tank yesterday in Illinois, Ohio, or Minnesota, that might be the last time you see prices under $4, if you see gasoline at all. But here's what the major news networks aren't explaining to you. This isn't really about gas prices. This is about the science of chemistry. And you need to understand the chemistry, because once you do, you'll realize why this can't be solved with a simple phone call, why this isn't just a trade argument. This is a structural dependence that we built over 3 decades and pretended didn't exist, and it just became visible in the worst way possible. For a decade, we've heard the same message repeated constantly. American energy freedom. We drill in Texas. We pump millions of barrels daily. We send oil to Europe, to Asia, everywhere. So when leaders say we don't need Canada, when advisors repeat the phrase like it's absolute truth, it sounds reasonable. It sounds like cutting off Canadian oil just means we use our own, except that's not how the science works, and science doesn't care about political speeches. Let me explain something that officials either don't understand or are choosing to ignore. There are 2 completely different kinds of crude oil: light sweet crude and heavy sour crude. Light sweet crude is what comes from Texas when you fracture shale rock. It's thin, flows easily, low in sulfur, clean, simple to refine. It's excellent quality. Heavy sour crude is thick, almost like tar. High sulfur content, difficult to process, requires enormous heat and pressure to break down. This is what comes from Canada's oil sands in Alberta. This is what used to come from Venezuela before sanctions. This is what used to come from Mexico before their production dropped. Now, here's the problem, and this is where the entire "we don't need anyone" narrative collapses. The giant refineries along America's Gulf Coast, the ones in Texas and Louisiana that make your diesel, your jet fuel, your gasoline, weren't built to handle light sweet crude. They were constructed in the 1990s and 2000s, back when we were buying heavy crude from Venezuela and Mexico. These corporations, Exxon, Chevron, Valero, they spent billions on specialized equipment called cokers and crackers. These are enormous industrial systems specifically engineered to break down heavy, thick oil. Think of it like a digestive system evolved to process one type of food. If you suddenly switch to a completely different type, it doesn't function properly. It can't function. The refineries operate at reduced capacity. They can't produce enough diesel. They literally start breaking down. For the past 5 years, since sanctions cut off Venezuela and Mexico's output fell, America's refining system has depended on one single source: Canada. Canada sends nearly 4 million barrels of heavy crude south every day. It moves through existing pipelines and by rail. It's the lifeblood of American industrial operations. When the tariff was imposed on Canadian energy, the thinking was that we were taxing a competitor. In reality, we were taxing our own supply system. But Canada didn't just absorb the tax, they shut down the supply completely. Let me show you the numbers that are devastating the middle of the country. The region covering the industrial Midwest relies on Canadian oil for 70% of what refineries need. 70%. Without that oil, refineries in Illinois, Ohio, Minnesota must close. You can't just ship Texas oil north overnight. There aren't pipelines running in that direction with that kind of capacity. The infrastructure was built to move oil from Canada southward to the Gulf Coast. It flows one way, north to south, sometimes west to east. We're looking at a situation where gas stations in Chicago, Detroit, Minneapolis run completely dry within 3 days. Not expensive gas. No gas at all. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve, our emergency backup, is mostly filled with medium-grade oil. It can help somewhat, but it can't replace 4 million barrels daily of a specific heavy type. And even if it could, the reserve is stored in underground caverns on the Gulf Coast, not in the Midwest. You can't just magically transport oil from Louisiana to Michigan. The confidence of we don't need Canada completely ignored the physical reality of how pipelines are actually mapped. We built a continent-wide energy system over 30 years, assuming borders were irrelevant. Now that the border has become a barrier, the system is broken. And people tried to warn us. They warned us directly. Let me tell you who attempted to prevent this. Jennifer Granholm, who served as Energy Secretary, wrote a classified document in March 2024. The title was about continental energy integration as a matter of national security. In that document, she outlined exactly this scenario. She wrote, and I'm reading from a version that was leaked, that any disruption to Canadian energy imports represents an immediate threat to American refinery operations and power grid stability. Granholm left her position 6 months later when that document was ignored by political officials who didn't want to hear the message. In June 2025, 14 refinery executives operating in the Midwest sent a joint letter to Washington. The letter stated in clear language, "We cannot operate without Canadian feedstock." The response, according to leaked versions published by major newspapers, was reportedly just one sentence: "Find other suppliers." There are no other suppliers. The chemistry doesn't exist anywhere else in the quantities we need. In November 2025, military leadership completed a classified strategic review. That review, parts of which have now been leaked, concluded that any disruption to Canadian energy imports represents a major vulnerability to United States military readiness. The report specifically mentioned that the Navy and Air Force depend on Gulf Coast refineries for jet fuel. If those refineries can't process heavy crude, they can't make jet fuel. If they can't make jet fuel, aircraft can't fly. 3 warnings, 3 separate organizations, Energy Department, private sector, military leadership, all saying the same exact thing, all ignored. Now you're going to hear officials claim this is short-term pain for long-term independence. Let me explain why that's not just wrong. It's scientifically impossible. You can't rebuild refineries in weeks. You can't undo 30 years of infrastructure investment. You can't change the molecular structure of oil because it's politically convenient. What I'm about to describe isn't one crisis. It's 7 connected crises that trigger each other like falling dominoes. And the first domino, the one that fell this morning when those pipeline valves closed, just knocked over the second one. Domino 1, refineries. This is happening right now, not in weeks, in hours. As I speak, refineries across the middle states are making a calculation they've never had to make. How long can we run on existing inventory before we must shut down? The answer varies by location. The BP Whiting refinery in Indiana, the largest in the Midwest, processes 440,000 barrels daily, nearly all of it heavy Canadian crude. They have roughly 3 days of supply and storage. After that, they either shut down or try to run light crude through systems not designed for it. If they attempt the latter, equipment breaks down rapidly. Critical components fail. You're looking at hundreds of millions in damage and months of repairs. By Thursday, we'll see the first announcements of temporary shutdowns. By Friday, gas stations will have lines stretching around blocks. By Saturday, some will have nothing left. And the price, if you can find gas at all, analysts are projecting $6 to $8 per gallon by next week. This isn't a pricing problem you solve with emergency reserves. This is a chemistry problem with no quick fix. Domino 2, uranium. Pay very close attention here because this one isn't measured in days. It's measured in weeks, but once it falls, it's irreversible. The United States imports 95% of its uranium. We produce almost nothing domestically. After Congress banned Russian uranium in 2024 to punish them over Ukraine, we had exactly one reliable, secure, massive supplier remaining: Canada. The uranium deposits in northern Saskatchewan are the highest quality on Earth. The mines there, operated by Cameco, produce the fuel that keeps American nuclear reactors operating. This morning, Cameco suspended all export licenses to the United States. They cited the Strategic Reserve Act. They're calling it a security review. What that actually means is they're not sending uranium until this trade conflict ends. Nuclear plants don't operate like gas stations. You can't just refill them when they run low. They run on fuel fuel cycles of 18 to 24 months. The fuel rods are loaded. They burn for about a year and a half. Then the reactor shuts down for refueling. 8 reactors across America are scheduled for refueling between April and June this year. If they don't receive those fuel bundles, they can't restart. They go dark. We're talking about losing 1/5 of America's electrical capacity right as we head into summer, right as air conditioning demand peaks. Rolling blackouts across the eastern seaboard aren't a possibility anymore. They're likely. And here's the nightmare part. You can't just buy uranium on the open market like you buy oil. Uranium must be mined, milled, converted, enriched, and manufactured into fuel assemblies. That supply chain takes years to build. Canada knows this. They understand that without their uranium, American aircraft carriers don't sail and the lights in Washington go dark. This is leverage that doesn't require a single weapon. Domino 3, food. And this one has a hard deadline that can't be moved. Spring planting season. American farmers have about 6 weeks to get fertilizer into the soil. If they miss that window, there's no crop in October. 85% of the potash used by American farmers comes from Saskatchewan. Potash is potassium chloride. You can't grow corn without it. You can't grow soybeans without it. It's not optional. It's basic chemistry. This morning, rail shipments of potash stopped at the Canadian border. The trains are sitting idle. The provincial leader, working with the national government, cited supply chain instability and halted all southbound fertilizer traffic. Farmers in Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska are staring at contracts they can't fulfill. They need that fertilizer now, not next month, now. If they don't apply it by mid-April, crop yields drop by 30 to 40%. Do you understand what that does to food costs? Corn feeds cattle, soybeans feed chickens and pigs. If the harvest drops by 40%, the price of beef, chicken, pork, milk, eggs, and bread doesn't just go up by 40%. It doubles, possibly triples. Grocery stores are already seeing panic buying in some Midwest cities. Analysts are calling it the breakfast crisis. $15 hamburgers by July isn't a joke. It's a mathematical projection based on market trends. Canada, meanwhile, has all the fertilizer they need. They can sell their excess food globally at record prices while American farmers face bankruptcy. The tariffs were supposed to protect American agriculture. Instead, they're blocking farmers from the one input they absolutely must have. Domino 4, aluminum and defense production. This is the crisis that frightens military planners. Aluminum is frozen electricity. To produce it, you need bauxite ore and enormous amounts of cheap power to run smelters. Canada has Quebec. Quebec has hydroelectric power. It's the perfect aluminum factory. Canada supplies 70% of American aluminum imports. That aluminum goes into trucks, electric vehicle frames, airplane bodies, and the armor on military vehicles. It goes into fighter jets. The United States produces a tiny fraction of what it consumes. We shut down our smelters decades ago because electricity here costs too much. With a 25% tariff added every time aluminum crosses the border, the just-in-time supply system of the auto industry has broken. Ford has already announced temporary production stops at Michigan plants. GM is following. Thousands of auto workers in critical states are being sent home. The United Auto Workers Union is furious, and they're not protesting in Canada. They're protesting in Washington. They know exactly who caused this, but the defense angle is worse. A Department of Defense report from 2025, portions of which have leaked, stated that reliable access to Canadian aluminum is essential for national defense strategy. We just sanctioned our own weapons supply. If we have to buy aluminum on the global market, we're competing with China. And Chinese aluminum is produced with coal power and increasingly subject to restrictions. We've cut ourselves off from the only clean, secure source of the metal we need to build equipment for future conflicts. Domino 5, water. The silent weapon nobody is discussing yet. The Great Lakes are shared between the United States and Canada, but Canada controls the northern flows. The Columbia River Treaty, which governs water between British Columbia and Washington state, is up for renegotiation this year. If Canada decides to maximize water levels on their side for hydroelectric generation, a completely justifiable reason given the energy situation, water levels in Washington and Oregon drop, the Grand Coulee Dam loses capacity. The Pacific Northwest, home to major tech company data centers, loses power. Canada has 20% of the world's fresh water. We can't manufacture that. Domino 6, Financial markets. By the time markets open tomorrow, we'll see real spread. Cameco stock was halted this morning. Nutrien, the world's largest potash producer, same thing. Exxon's refining profit margins are collapsing in after-hours trading. Canadian banks are quietly selling United States Treasury bonds. The Canadian dollar dropped 8% overnight, but that's actually helping them. Their exports to Asia just became cheaper. We're the ones losing capital. Domino 7, the NATO alliance, and this is the unthinkable part. NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, depends on radar stations on Canadian territory to detect threats coming over the Arctic. If this trade conflict continues, if it gets worse, we're economically attacking a NATO ally. Germany issued a statement this morning. I'm quoting, "We cannot support economic warfare against a fellow NATO member." Europe is siding with Canada. The ultimate irony is that we're isolating ourselves from our own alliance. 7 dominoes. The first 3 are falling right now. The next 4 are tipping. And Canada isn't negotiating. They're pivoting to Asia. Let me show you how. For years, the United States blocked pipeline projects like Keystone XL because we understood the strategic reality. If Canada can't get their oil to a coastline, they have to sell it to us at a discount. It's called the WCS discount, Western Canadian Select. It has saved American consumers billions per year. We kept Canada landlocked intentionally. That strategy died in 2025. The Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion finally opened completely. Canada now has direct access to the Pacific Ocean. They're no longer trapped selling to the American market. Sunday night, 12 hours ago, while Washington was celebrating what they thought was a winning position, Canada's energy minister was meeting with CNOOC, the China National Offshore Oil Corporation. By Monday morning, the agreement was finalized. Every barrel of heavy crude that America rejects, China will purchase at a premium. Tankers are lining up in Vancouver right now. This is a 10-year guaranteed purchase agreement. Canada isn't scrambling for buyers. They already have one, the world's largest energy consumer. The Royal Bank of Canada released analysis this morning. They're calling it the dependency trap exit strategy. For decades, Canada has been 70% dependent on the United States for trade. That dependency, the report argues, is a national security risk. Canada is willing to accept a short-term recession to break that chain. They're fast-tracking liquefied natural gas terminals on the West Coast. They're negotiating critical mineral exports to Japan and South Korea. Europe issued a statement this morning. Germany specifically said they stand with Canada. Japanese energy firms are signing contracts. Canada isn't isolated. We are. Inside Washington, reports suggest panic is setting in. A source who was in the Situation Room Sunday night said a top official turned to the president and said they weren't supposed to actually do this. The plan assumed they would send negotiators. By Monday morning, the Treasury Secretary was reportedly telling people that if markets open like this, we're looking at a 2008-level crisis by Wednesday. The Secretary of State allegedly said NATO is fracturing, not over Ukraine, over fertilizer. So what happens in the next 72 hours? Here's what to watch. Tonight, Monday evening, there are reports of a possible emergency Federal Reserve meeting. Washington is expected to issue a statement by 11 p.m. Eastern. Listen for the phrase strategic review. That means they're backing down. Tomorrow morning, watch the markets. Cameco, Nutrien, Exxon. If trading halts trigger, we're in full crisis mode. Gas station footage from Chicago will dominate news coverage by noon. Tomorrow afternoon, Canada's Prime Minister addresses Parliament at 2 p.m. Eastern. Will he accept a partial retreat from Washington, or will he demand complete renegotiation of the entire trade framework? Wednesday is the deadline. Spring planting contracts must be signed. If those potash trains don't start moving by Wednesday night, farmers miss the window. The 2026 harvest is lost. Can this be reversed? Technically, yes. The export ban can be lifted, pipelines can reopen, trains can roll. But here's what can't be reversed: the assumption. For 100 years, America assumed Canada had nowhere else to go. That assumption died Sunday night. Canada now knows they have options, They have infrastructure to the Pacific. They have buyers in Asia. They have leverage. 7 dominoes, 3 have fallen, 4 are tipping. The economic damage is measured in hours. The strategic damage is measured in decades. The alliance damage may be permanent. The question isn't whether Washington will back down. It's whether Canada will accept that backing down. Because for the first time in a century, they don't have to. Subscribe to this channel immediately. Turn on notifications. When Washington issues that statement tonight, you'll see the analysis here first. Share this with anyone who thinks geography doesn't matter, with anyone who believes science bends to politics. Drop a comment. Did you know we can't process our own oil? Tomorrow's breakdown covers Detroit. The auto industry is collapsing in real time, 6 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss it. The arrogance was, we don't need Canada. The reality is we can't function without them. And they just proved it. Stay alert.